Hello and welcome to another Thursday, another episode of the Gwentlemen Talkshow. As always, I am Dale, the White Wolf, joined with Swim. We also have Jaggerus joining us for a recurring third host spot. Jaggerus, how are you doing today?
Yeah, it's great to be here from my room. I'm doing pretty good. How are you guys?
I am doing well. And of course, our very special guest today, Aya. Aya, thank you for agreeing to be on the show again 2 times now.
Oh, yes.
It's been too long since we've had you last. I think it was mid-April-ish, and we were still in closed beta as well. So, man, it's been some time.
I watched that VOD recently. I kind of checked it out casually, and I had like a beard back then. It was very weird.
Is that not something you're tempted to do again?
No, that was just a phase.
It's never just a phase, Swim.
I don't think it's ever just a phase of Swim.
Thank you for having me, Dale, again.
Thank you very much for agreeing to be on here again.
Yeah, sure. I mean, you treated me pretty well last time, so I came back.
Well, glad to hear it. Oh, man. So it's been I don't think that things have slowed down since the patch. I mean, we had the patch, we had the hotfix, and we just are still rolling along. How has everybody been liking the past week in terms of maybe meta-civilization or just, I don't know, just experiences from the past week? How is it treating you with the game?
Honestly, it's pretty great. I'm a big fan of it. Like, a lot of people are saying Northern Realms is still too strong. A lot of people are saying Hailstorm is still too strong. And honestly, those are definitely true to a degree. But there's a lot of diversity on ladder, even at this stage. I mean, typically in some other patches, we've seen diversity dip really quickly after the first week or so. But I'm still seeing a lot of very surprising things at the top ranks.
I agree. I think there's all sorts of different things being played, especially on the pro ladder. I feel like people are trying different things. You're seeing cards that you never would have expected, like Sabrina. You know, people are just kind of doing their own thing, and it's really fun to see on streams. It's really fun to play myself, and I think Gwent's in a really good place right now.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that you just get whenever you get all these changes is people just kind of forget that certain cards have gotten changed. Like, I remember the first time I saw Sabrina come after me after the patch, and I'm just like, okay, cool, like, whatever, and then went off. I'm just like, oh, that's what it does now.
Yeah, if only like I had a penny for every time I played a card thinking it does a thing, but it does something else, because they recently like all changed. But now it's nice to see the game like organically figuring out its meta and people still trying new things. And I'm glad that we have like these 2-month seasons. So, you know, like, it's still like the first month, the first half. So people are like, whatever, I'll just climb by the end of the season now. Let's try different things and stuff. So yeah, I've been seeing a lot of different decks, and I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think one of the things that really makes this meta different right now is the fact that it's the first one we're seeing with Pro Ladder. Pro Ladder is, a lot of people are saying Pro Ladder is great. You know, it actually has a direct impact on like the ranked meta as well, since like a lot fewer people are playing ranked meta, because a lot more people, especially at the top end, are playing the Pro Ladder, trying to like grind to those games in. It's pretty interesting, and I like the fact that, you know, obviously, so some people are saying basically you just play the Pro Ladder if you want to see like an even distribution, and I think that's pretty a fair thing to say.
Yeah, I think Gwent itself has been quite interesting, because there is that Gwent slam spot for whoever's number one at the top of the pro ladder in, I think, the next couple of days. So the people who are most competitive are really trying to get those 400 games and then grinding it out to try and get that number one spot, because it's like a free invite. So in terms of ranked, like, well, the pros are away, the scrubs shall play, and I've been having a great time. And like, I've played absolutely no pro ladder. I'll get to it at the end of this, like towards the middle of the season. But for now, I was just like, you know, I'm just going to get my ranked on, have a bit of fun in there, and when everyone else comes back to try harding that, like, that's when I'll go play the pro ladder. Or just stay away from everyone. It's going to be fantastic.
Maximum
like meta decisions. I'm sorry, what were you saying?
Yeah, I was saying that I'm doing the same thing, like maximum efficiency in the games that I'm playing. So while the good players are in the pro ladder, I'm playing the regular ladder, which is like, it kind of like feels like casual sometimes lately. I don't know, maybe because a lot of people are now playing the pro ladder, so no one really scary there. And then, yeah, probably around like the mid of the season, I'm going to start trying the pro ladder, see what's what.
So basically, pro ladder is going to just be me and Aya duking it out for 400 games. It's going to be fantastic.
I think the only concern that I personally have with like the state of the game and how pro ladder impacts ranked is that I was saying like we're actually looking at a pretty diverse meta, right? Like I've been playing ranked all day today, and I saw a good distribution of at least 3 different factions, and that's honestly pretty good because typically at this state, a lot of the times the top end is gonna have boiled down to 2 factions primarily at this point, and 3 is pretty healthy compared to what you can expect reasonably from like a top level competitive. The only concern is that it's possible that this is just a result of a lot more of the competitive people playing pro ladder, and so like it ends up being more diverse just because it's slightly less competitive in a way, and therefore when people like kind of finish their pro ladder games and maybe play more ranked or something like that, especially like near the end of the season, we might be seeing the meta like really dissolve into 1 or 2 decks more so.
Yeah, but do you really think that people coming from pro ladder are going to be like, all right, cool, I've done all my try hard games and now time for ranked and trying to keep up the try? Like that would just be like time to blow off steam. Let's just go keep playing and not have to worry about that anymore. I'm not as concerned about that. It's healthy enough, I think, with the meta, that especially with the ranked meta as opposed to the pro ladder meta, that it's just I don't see that changing even after all the pro ladder players are done playing on the pro ladder. It's probably going to stay roughly the same. It's my prediction. But we've been talking about pro ladder, ranked ladder, and I know we brought it up as a concern whenever pro ladder came out, but I don't think anybody's mentioned casuals games yet.
What are those? Like,
yeah, is that
I haven't played a single casual game this season, I don't think.
I don't think I have either, but is it just maybe us in our positions that we're not really like playing the casual because it doesn't appeal to us? Because I don't know, that's something I would love to see the data on from CDPRs. How many people are actually still playing casuals?
Oh, I'm sure there's really a lot of people still playing them. I mean, a lot of players that are just kind of less dedicated to the game, less committed, especially, if they're just trying to like mess around and don't necessarily want to risk like losing MMR. Like casual is just going to appeal to a lot of less dedicated players.
Yeah, there are a lot of players I think that exclusively play casual and don't play ranked at all,
Yeah.
even though even if you're not the bestest player, you could get a few ranks on ranked and get some decent rewards. It's a good way to play kegs. I remember when I hit level 10, when I was very new to Gwent the first time, the chat I was streaming and they were like, dude, just go play ranked. Like, even if you don't think you're going to be very good, go play ranked because you'll just get these rewards. Whereas I had that mindset of, I'm not going to be very good, so there's no point playing ranked. And then I played ranked and then it was all fine and I got lots of rewards. And, I do think there is a big subset of players, though, that don't play competitively and only play casually.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I always liked casuals because, I like playing meme decks a lot. And I always like feel safer in casuals. But like after these patch, I feel like we don't have any memes left in Gwent. I mean, everything is
like
either viable or just bad. Yeah, I mean, even Cambi is not even a meme anymore, right? He even used to be meta for a while. And now it's just that kind of weird card that like does things, but people are not experimenting with yet. So I would like to see more meme cards. Please make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of agree. Like, if anybody remembers at the start of the closed beta, there were some hilariously cheesy strats that were not only decent at that time, they were very, very good. We all remember something about promoting adrenaline rush units, something about PFI. There were a lot of different decks that just did absurd cheese. Commanders are on doubled strength. You could use it like 3 or 4 times. It was pretty funny.
Dandelion spawned a Commander's Horn.
Yeah. I mean, there was there was a lot of ridiculous things you could do, and it seemed like basically if you take a line from then to now, they've really been cutting back on a lot of the like cheesy strategies. In this last patch, like Aya, what you're saying is there's not a lot of kind of more memey or cheesy strategies left. I mean, a lot of stuff that was memey, like for example, the old like super adrenaline rush decks that were out there, a lot of them kind of started as memes, and some of them ended up evolving into competitive decks. Like, you know, Adrenaline Rush with Fringilla was honestly decent, and then the Dwarf deck was quite strong, but they all started as kind of meme decks, and you don't really have as many options anymore.
I was gonna say, like, with all the like no meme cards left, is it really just Gwent kind of getting like we're refining the game to the point where it's like, yes, we can all sit down, have a nice solid game of Gwent, nobody's trying to flip the table on us? Like, it's I don't know if it's necessarily that's where it's an interesting balance, because like I would almost like to see, you know, these cards come back, like whenever Wild Boar of the Sea was first introduced and nobody could make it work, like stuff like that, because it's, I don't know, it's weird because we're always here pushing for the competitive experience as much as possible, because that's personally what I like to see as much of, and we're leaving behind like this aspect of Gwent as we're refining ourselves towards this. I'm not sure if it's something that we really should be wanting to lose, because there is a lot of fun to be had whenever you're just purely casual playing and purely trying to meme as much as possible.
Yeah, I agree. I was going to just say, from a content creation side, like at the start of the season, it's all like, let's do, you know, ranked decks, let's do really kind of try hard decks. But then as the season progresses, that's when I find for myself, I get more creative with my deck building, and that's when the memes start to come out. So I feel like maybe at the moment it's just that we're kind of too early in the patch cycle for it to maybe be a thing. Like, there's still options. You can still do like a neutral deck, or you could try and make a deck that's like all mages, or as many mages as you possibly can put in it. You know, you could maybe play around with like an Iris carryover deck. There are things that you can definitely try and do, but I agree that it's maybe more limited and less obvious than it used to be.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. And I do think that it's probably good that they're kind of moving in this direction of taking out, you know, some memes that quite honestly maybe were stronger than they should have been. They're kind of reining that in. And I think like as the card pool expands, they'll add in a lot of like more kind of fun, more trolly options that you can just mess around with deep into a meta.
Yeah, I agree with Swim. Like, now it's about figuring out like the balance of the game and like actually the cards, and then like the memes will slowly come, but I think they are still like healthy for the game, and there should be a thing, like they should come back.
Well, speaking of the state of the game, meta-ish, I know, Swim, you already cut in with the healthy meta of 3 factions right now, but how's overall the different factions looking?
Well, red and blue are looking pretty good. I think green is starting to come back in flavor a little bit. Saw a good amount of green today. There's this new Scoia'tael net deck that's going around a little bit. I mean, they're okay. I have not been seeing a lot of black and purple.
I feel like we need to get like a little stock tracker or something as an overlay for this.
I think purple's in a really tough spot at the moment. Like, a lot of their power is reliant on synergies, and with a lot of the kind of weather and movement effects that are kind of kicking around, it's maybe a bit tricky to get those synergies to trigger. And then on top of that, I think their power curve is just a little bit lower than especially like Northern Realms and Monsters, for example. So they're having a much tougher time than they were, say, in season 1 of Open Beta.
Yeah, which is surprising, because purple has always been, one of the factions that's always like kind of good, because you have the resurrection mechanic. They're always going to be like a good thing. But I feel like Skellige, the problem that it has now is that the gold cards are not very great. Like, there's nothing that you can like play and like swing the board into your favor with the gold cards. They're just acting kind of like tech cards, almost like war silvers sometimes. So I think that's creating an issue for them.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think Ceres is pretty amazing, but in general, they don't have astounding options. Lugos is kind of like a better Eskel, sort of.
Kind of. Now that you put that comparison out there, I'm just like, It's always fun talking with you, Swim, sometimes, because it's just like I would not ever think to characterize it that way, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Dale, what do you think, man? I mean,
I think that I actually haven't gotten a chance to play any Gwent since last Thursday, so a lot of my stuff is a week behind. It's been a rough week, to be honest. But I think that that's where I really want to try to get more of you guys' opinions on things, because I'll contribute where I can. But one card in particular that I think we discussed a little bit last week, and I think has been confirmed, maybe, or heard rumors out there that it is getting a look at, is Miracles Hailstorm, just kind of being an incredibly powerful silver still. So do we think that that's something that needs to be changed? I know, Swim, I think you and I were in agreement last week that targeting 5 units would probably be okay, and I think we had some hard 4s from some people as well.
Ooh. Yeah, I think, so here's, I actually said earlier today on my stream, I think I summed up my point on it pretty decently. So there's people in the camp of don't change Hailstorm. There's people in the camp of do change Hailstorm. Really, the argument kind of boils down to the people that say don't change Hailstorm are mostly concerned that the Hailstorm is keeping these strategies in check, and the strategies are going to kind of go out of control if Hailstorm drops out of fashion. And in reality, I think the reason why we didn't see Hailstorm get nerfed in the hotfix is exactly for that reason. Because the Hailstorm nerf has some far-reaching implications. Like people are saying, it makes other things potentially swing like, wildly high in their power, and that doesn't necessarily mean that Hailstorm shouldn't be nerfed, but it's a more complex decision. In terms of nerfing Hailstorm, you kind of have to make sure a bunch of things are in a good power level before you can do that, I suppose. And that's pretty much what they're doing now, I guess. I mean, they're kind of, they're taking a look at it more. They're running their, their tests and their simulations, and they're, seeing what they have to do to be able to nerf Hailstorm. But it absolutely should be toned down a little bit. I do still like it at 5 units, like Commandatorn.
So you're thinking this is not just a simple hot fix, just go ahead and make it target only 5 units or so?
Not quite.
This is more of like the Miracles Hailstorm patch, as you see Miracles Hailstorm got changed in like 20 or 30 other things as well.
No, I wouldn't say 20 or 30, no, but maybe a couple. I mean, it is unlike the other things they nerfed. Like they nerfed, some things that were just kind of like out of proportion a little bit. Some things in Scoia'tael, for example, and those were important, but the Hailstorm just it does have some tricky implications. Probably not more than a couple, though.
The thing you have to be aware of is Hailstorm hasn't been changed for, quite a while. It's always been like this, and I feel like the reason it's become good is because of the changes they made to other cards. Like, Hailstorm hasn't suddenly become, like, it's not like we've only just realized that Hailstorm is a card, and beforehand, it was amazing and nobody noticed. Like, it's kind of a product of the current state of the game. And so I think you have to be a little bit careful in necessarily how you change it, because it's not necessarily Hailstorm that is the problem. It's maybe to do with how the kind of current state of the game is, with things like bronze cards getting much stronger and row stacking and those kind of elements. I mean, the gentlest nerf you could do would make it round down instead of round up, which I don't personally feel like is maybe enough. But then if you go for 5 units, I guess it makes positioning more of a thing, because, they added positioning in the whole positioning patch, and then no one really cared about it since. So maybe with these kind of changes, it'll start to make positioning more important. But I'm not entirely sure the best way you do it. And I agree with Swim that you have to be careful about other decks, basically running Rampart, and maybe decks like Movement Scoia'tael then falling out of favor completely because you no longer have the Hailstorm to benefit from.
Yeah, it's kind of strange because when the gold no longer being immune thing was kind of introduced, I was having these nightmares that unseen elders being scorched, Tibors being scorched and whatnot. But now the game's kind of, why bother running Scorch and Igni when you can just run Hailstorms? So I feel like the fact that Hailstorm exists kind of doesn't allow the game to have a control archetype, because I don't feel like it would be worth it when you can just have a neutral card that will provide you similar value. And I feel like 5 units might be okay. I agree with rounding it down as well. But yeah, I'm not gonna miss the movement Scoia'tael if Miracles Hailstorm is changing, so I don't really mind about that. I feel like some of the control options are not being explored because of like such things.
Yeah, I think as Jaggers pointed out, that Miracles Hailstorm has been like this, I think, since the weather update, and it's the rest of the game that's kind of pushed this card to the top. And you mentioned movement Scoia'tael especially, where you're just like, all right, cool, I'm going to play around their Hailstorm, I'm going to make sure I spread out all my units in different rows, and they're just like, nope, same row, every time. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. I do think that it's a card that definitely should be getting looked at, but it'll be interesting to see what else gets changed, because if you just change the one, then, yeah, it's going to be, I don't know, I feel like we're getting into like some weird tangled web of like Hailstorm dependencies. So,
yeah, and I mean, Jaggers, you brought up the point earlier that a lot of people, I mean, the fact that Hailstorm didn't actually get changed, right? But it went from being not unplayable, but it's up play in maybe one deck, like Pumpkin used it in Scoia'tael a little bit, and now it's, the thing people are complaining about. And I think there's actually a lot more, I guess, behind that transition than most people give it credit for. Like, a lot of people cite the kind of bronze power creep and the gold's immunity being gone as the biggest reasons. And I think there's potentially one or two other reasons as well. I mean, it was a meta shift, a drastic meta shift. The Dagon meta went out, and there's a lot more power coming in from the Northern Realms meta instead. Like, it went from kind of a very, not necessarily controlly meta, but a low tempo meta. Like, Dagon just kind of plays for value by damaging the opponent's board rather than developing their own unit. So it was a huge meta shift, and it was also the Igni nerf, I think, as well. Like, one of the things about Igni is that at the beginning of a meta, it's always kind of showing up, being prevalent, keeping things in check. But with the Igni nerf, Hailstorm, it kind of ends up finding that niche, and because of movement tools like Scoia'tael has, in certain decks, even when people stop stacking that row as much, it still just keeps seeing play. So there's like 5 or 6 reasons in total that all happened at the same patch that caused Hailstorm to start seeing this much play.
I mean, I think a lot of people are all like, they have this mentality that, oh, everyone just whines about cards. That's all that's happening. Reddit, And I feel like, yes, to a point, maybe people should just get over it and deal with it. But at the same time, I think if there's cards that feel oppressive, there's no harm in talking about changing them. And, CDPR have said themselves that they're looking to address it. So it's not, I don't feel like it's just the, this kind of vocal community or vocal minority that feels like this is a problem. I think, like, if CDPR are also looking into it, then they're aware that they think this card is, more powerful than they intended it to be.
Well, speaking of trying to just get over it and play with it, I know that Hotfix saw changes to a lot of factions except one that I think caught people by surprise. So how does it feel seeing as much blue as we are right now?
I mean, if you told me that last time I was here, I would call you crazy. Because, I mean, Northern Elves have always been trying to figure out their identity, kind of. And it feels kind of bad because every time they're, like, in the meta, they're sort of degenerate. Like, people hate them. It's not just, like, a strong deck. It's an annoying deck, kind of. And, I mean, with like the tweaks in armor units and stuff, I feel like they became a little like more powerful than they can handle. I'm still like judging the not hot fixing the Dunbanner heavy cavalry, I'd say. And I'm having also like some flashbacks from early closed beta where you would Sunny into Priscilla, into River Scout, into copying something, and now you do like the same thing with tennis but you also like have the armor bonus. So I don't know. I think they might be like a bit too strong right now.
Yeah, I'd probably agree. I think a lot of people are kind of overstating how strong NR are because that's just often how people communicate. We like to exaggerate in many situations. I feel like NR is definitely strong enough to warrant minor nerfs. I'd like to see, for example, something being done to Stennis, possibly be something being done to Shani, maybe Natalis dropping a point or two or something like that. But honestly, across the board, NR is a lot closer to being fun than I think people give it credit for.
I was going to say, I think the biggest issue with Northern Realms is maybe not the cards themselves, but the fact that they have quite a lot of options for big tempo, few card plays. So, you could do Natalis into Reinforcements into Stennis, or Natalis with Commander Sworn. I guess that you'd require units for that. Or you could play Stennis, or you could Shani into Stennis, or you can like Trollolol into Dunvanner Heavy Cavalry. There's a lot of options in there for low tempo, or Dijkstra, for example, high tempo, low card plays, which means that they can kind of afford to just bleed you a lot, and then round 3 they just get 1,000,000 points. And it's not the cards themselves, it's the fact that there's so many different ways that they can do it that it's very consistent. And that's maybe where part of the problem with Northern Realms lies, in my opinion.
Yeah, tutoring is like always a dangerous area in card games, like having easy access to a very good card, stuff like Reinforcements, being able to Natalis Reinforcements into Stennis. I think like it might be a bit dangerous.
I liked what Aya said earlier, that every time that Northern Realm seems to be like really good, it's never for like, no one ever is just like, yeah, like, this is a fine way of playing the game. It's always like, really? Like, okay, fine. I mean, we're going back to PFI days, we're going back to Golden Trebuchets days. Like, it seems like every time Northern Realms is good, it's always for the wrong reasons. But I agree with Swim, where this is probably the closest that it's felt like to Northern Realms, like being in the spotlight, but being okay about it. I really think that the numbers just come down a little bit across the board for a lot of the problem cards, and it's fine. It honestly is. Like, it's the whole idea behind it is the identity is now, a little bit more resilient with some nice swing plays, and it's really on an almost good spot, and it's just maybe a little bit too overtuned right now.
I agree. It comes down to basic numbers. Same with like machines, for example. I know some people are really frustrated with the battering rams and how they kind of play out with the crewmen and that. And I think it just comes down to maybe tweaking the strength values of the cards themselves, like the dumb banana or like the battering ram, maybe giving it a few fewer points so that then it's not quite as impactful. And then those few ones across the board will, equate to quite a few points across the course of a game.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Natalis is actually quite good to the point of being kind of understated. I feel like a lot of people are, Stennis is too strong, armor, heavy cavalry. I don't really think heavy cavalry should honestly be nerfed. I feel like that would be, I think it's just drawing most of its power from Stennis and arguably Shani. But I think Natalis is kind of managing to avoid a lot of criticism. The ability to tutor from that pool of cards is incredibly powerful. Like, it's easy to look at Natalis and compare him to, say, Vesemir, who has basically the same exact text with one word being different. But that one word, the difference between Tactics and Alchemy card is obviously absolutely massive, because Tactics might be the most valuable tag in the entire game, just based on, like, in terms of the spell tags, just based on, like, which cards you have access to. You have a lot of high power silvers. I actually can't think of anything better than Tactics in terms of one of the silver tags, and Alchemy is one of the worst ones. So, it just goes to show that, like, the identity of these tags really, really matters.
Well, moving on from Northern Realms, we've just got other factions in play, and one of the ones that surprises me actually is Monsters just coming up and being like, you can never get rid of that faction. Yep. It seems like any meta is just like, we've got something. Like, give us a moment, we'll figure it out, and then comes up with something new. It always seems like, at least right now, we're dealing with mostly hybrid consume from what I've seen.
I even think that's kind of underrepresented. I think there's like 3 or 4 variations of, don't get me wrong, the decks end up being pretty similar, but I don't think the consume package there is necessary. I think Monsters is pretty great right now in a lot of different ways.
Like which ones?
Just general weather packages, pretty much anything that spams weather with harpies. Today I saw a couple interesting decks. I saw one that was just like heavy beast spam. One of my opponents at the top of ladder was playing 2 Necker Warriors that he would just use on harpies, and like renewing Woodland Spirit to spam enough beasts to get them all out. It was doing pretty well, I think. And then I saw a different opponent on ladder today who was using just like a more kind of weathery control list, like no Vrans and no Neckers, but a similar package otherwise. Drowner, just decent value. Like, I think Monsters just has some very powerful tools right now. Like, they did lose some off of the nerf, but you end up with Harpies, which are some of the strongest cards in the game, which basically just completely negate or even almost reverse the nerf to Kalana Harpies, because they still have the Harpies coming out of the deck anyway. And that thins even. And then they've got Drowners, which just have, you know, a really huge amount of power with even one row of weather there.
It's kind of like if it's not Solano Harpies, it's regular Harpies. One of the, now I'm saying Harpies kind of sounds weird to me, but one of the, I think, things or issues with monsters in terms of why they get a lot of their strength is Woodland Spirit, because with Woodland Spirit you spawn those dogs which are beasts which pull Harpies. You can then, if you run Roach as well, that's a gold card, so there's a lot of thinning and strength, plus you get the fog, plus you get the foglet. So it's all of these kind of different cogs all working together on one card that I think can be quite a oppressive play. And when you're looking at other factions that don't have these tempo plays, you know, like the Nilfgaard, like the Skellige, and like the Scoia'tael, then it can feel quite one-sided, and that's maybe where people are taking issue.
Yeah, it feels like Woodland Spirit is the card that has always been carrying monsters in a way. Like it's always like putting the decks together. But I kind of makes me wonder if the carryover is also an issue though. Because like in this meta, we see like very often people really like fighting for round 1 and a lot of decks that prefer a long round 3. So it's like quite common to see like get round 1, dry pass round 2, and then just like have a long round 3. But like Monsters is probably like the only faction that makes use of like carryover right now. So you cannot like straight pass them and get the advantage in round 2. So I feel like carryover is still like a very like good thing they have going on for them, and the fact that it's kind of exclusive to the faction will always like make Dagon be a good deck.
Yeah, they have such even when you're not running Consume, you have innate synergy with carryover just because you're always running Harpies, you're always running Kalana Harpies, and then you've just got Ekimaras, which are always going to outvalue something like a Combat Engineer or a Mahakam Defender.
I'm 100% convinced, though, that as soon as you, like, Monsters just as a faction is the one that always surprised me. It's just like, Woodland Spirit's the card, and it's like, okay, cool, they're never Woodland Spirit, and then, like, give them 5 days, and they'll come back, and it's like, here's another card.
I mean, in terms of carryover, you've also got Doragure giving everyone access to Ekamara, and you've got what they called combat engineers on Nilfgaard. So, I mean, yes, they have carryover, they have Neckers, they have Poppy Eggs, they have Ekamara, but I'm not necessarily convinced that that's the biggest issue with them, and that's what necessarily makes them better than other factions, although I guess it is built into more of their cards, because I think other factions, if they wanted carryover, could run it. It's just that it's not strong in those factions.
Yeah, I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it's just saying that I think it's like one of the things that if you take out of Monsters, I feel like they will not be like, they will not have the same identity that they have now.
That's fair to say. I think with their identity, they're in a bit of a weird spot because Weather has been kind of co-opted by a lot of other factions, and that was that they used to have. So now they kind of have like Consume, Carryover, and Wild Hunt. And I mean, Wild Hunt we saw during TGI. 2 teams brought Wild Hunt and 2 teams brought Consume. How do you feel that those 2 decks compare against each other?
I would feel like Consume ends up being a little bit better, but I mean, it really depends on the meta because Wild Hunt is so, it's not only got the weather orientation, but it's got the longboats, right? So not only are you, I mean, is it great in a meta that doesn't run a lot of clears, and this is maybe not as good in a meta that does, but it's also great in a meta that doesn't run a lot of, you know, kind of removal targets for the longboats like Alzur's Thunder or Eskel, and not as good in targets as those. It's a very, very meta-specific one. I feel like Consume is a little better right now.
I was going to say, especially in the context of TGI, I would lean a little bit more towards Consume because, as Swim pointed out, it's meta-dependent. In a tournament, you kind of have an idea of what you're getting into. So you're like, okay, I think they're going to be running Wild Hunt. Let's just go ahead and stack some Thunders for the boats. And that eliminates so much power from them.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if Wild Hunt... I mean, I think it still needs like some cards to be really viable. I mean, it's nice to see that like it's a thing, but I'm not a huge fan of like archetypy cards, like cards synergizing with other cards just because they have a tag. So that like you can search Wild Hunt in the deck, put all the Wild Hunt cards together and like make a deck. I've always thought that it's kind of like a beginner type of like deck building. So I don't know. I haven't seen them on the ladder a lot. And maybe they're good in a tournament format, but I haven't been playing much.
Yeah, something you always have to be aware of or just be cautious of, I guess, is like the decks that build themselves. And it's where it's just like, yeah, this has the tag, just search for it. Like, I think there was an elf deck that somebody did. It was just like, how do I build this? Like, just search elf and you're done.
Yeah, the Mulligan one, right? The original like Vanguard one, yeah.
I mean, fun fact, you can't make a mage deck by searching mage because damage has the word mage in it. So it gives you every card that damages everything. So if you ever want to make a mage deck, it's a bit more tricky. It requires a little bit more thought process. So, you know, our old Dagon players from last patch probably wouldn't manage it so well.
But speaking of the elves and everything, so Scoia'tael, I think that Swim was saying, Green is doing better than expected despite getting quite a few nerfs.
Yeah, I mean they're definitely kind of. Scoia'tael feels a little bit like whack-a-mole right now. Like they got hit, they're trying to kind of pop back up in the ways they can, right? Like people played these Golden Weathers, those who were doing very well at the start. They still are in many ways. Scoia'tael is like just kind of butting up with new decks. Some people are actually doing very well with like kind of dwarf variants, and then there's this new Skellige deck that's actually pretty common at this moment. I think they have options.
I have a question for you, Swim.
Yeah.
Why do you call it Scoia'tael and not Scoia'spell?
Fantastic question. So this was a question posited to me actually quite a while ago, whether it should be named Scoia'tael or Scoia'tael or Scoia'spell. I personally at the time I combined them. I thought it should have been called Spell, but nobody really liked that one, so it didn't stick.
I think Scoia'spell for me it's so much better, and like Scoia'tael is stuck. I'm just like I can't change it. Like this is what it's gonna be from now on, and it's all your fault. So I'm not happy. Anyway, moving back to actually Scoia'tael and their state in the current meta. I'm loving me some movement Scoia'tael. Just play all of the weather. It makes me happy. I think they're really fun. I think they get super countered by Marauders, but you don't see Marauders so often, so it's mostly pretty happy. But I wonder if the reason that they're okay is because of Hailstorm, which we were talking about earlier.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to say. Sorry.
And the fact that they recently had a hotfix, and like we've seen that before, that whenever something is like getting nerfed, people are just moving away from it, whether it's like good yet or not. I think that like in this season we're going to see like Scoia'tael make a comeback. It's just that now because they were recently like nerfed, people are not experimenting with them as much.
Yeah, I think that happens a lot with patches where it's just like, okay, what got nerfed? Not playing that anymore, just delete all those cards. Like a lot of times you can be like still good even if it's nerfed.
I feel like Scoia'tael, what really defines Scoia'tael is they're very flexible. I feel like I would say. I mean, there's a lot of options right now. Like I said, I mean, I listed like 3 different decks that people are really kind of trying to play, and they'll always survive in some form or another, even if it won't necessarily be, super top tier. But when you compare them to, say, for example, Nilfgaard, which is another faction that, is not seeing, as much play as some of the more popular ones, Nilfgaard has really, really restricted deck building rules. I mean, you're playing Spy, you're playing Mill, or you're seeing if you can make Reveal work. It's pretty much one of the 3 options. And right now we're I think with the play rates that we're seeing in Nilfgaard on ladder are pretty much representative of the facts.
I don't know. I think Nilfgaard has the unfortunate side effect that a lot of their control cards are now spawning harpies.
Yeah. No, I was playing earlier, and my opponent tried rot tossing me, and it summoned a harpy onto that row, and it blocked the cow carcass.
Does that just come down to a problem with tags, though, that a cow carcass is a beast, and therefore it's not an intended interaction that, you know, the harpies will be pulled out of the deck and protect against cow carcasses? Like, maybe that's just something that incidentally happened and maybe wasn't intentional with CDPR, and as a result of that, stuff like the harpies are really crushing Nilfgaard. Because I think earlier in the hotfix, we did see a lot of Nilfgaard. Like, I felt like I was running into spies quite consistently. I think I got like 5 spy games in a row at one point. But then with Dagon Consume now becoming more prevalent, that's kind of led on a knock-on effect to a decrease in Nilfgaard. And maybe it's some of these interactions that are stopping it from being more prevalent.
Honestly, I think it mostly comes back to the same thing. It really, to me personally, I feel like it's really attributed to the just rigidity and inflexibility of the Nilfgaard idea. Like, we saw a lot of Nilfgaard at the early days of the patch because honestly, the cards that they have are good. Like, for example, the Spy Nilfgaard. It's a powerful archetype, but it isn't really flexible. So when the meta is able to kind of adapt and also kind of grow a little bit, certain decks have been optimized or improved in the past like week and a half, 2 weeks. Nilfgaard kind of feels a little left behind. It just doesn't really feel like it can do that as well as other factions.
See, but is that something that Nilfgaard needs to be doing as a faction, or is it supposed to, like, does the blame lie on the fact that, you know, Nilfgaard was strong, so other decks came up and to attack it, and monsters as well against it, and there's nothing out there that does the same thing that monsters did to Nilfgaard to monsters? So then, like, if monsters died down, then Nilfgaard goes up. Like, where's the actual blame lie with the meta? Like,
I guess I'm mostly. Oh, sorry.
What? Is it just that, like, Nilfgaard isn't shifting properly, or is it that the rest of the meta isn't shifting properly?
I think it's. I mean, when you're deck building for Nilfgaard, right? You don't really have a lot of just like flexible options, right? Like certain cards in certain other decks are going to be very powerful and are going to carry basically any of those decks that are run. Like, for example, Harpies and monsters are very powerful, and there's a few different ways to play them. Some of the packages, some of the finishes in Northern Realms are very powerful, and you'll see some of the same patterns across, you know, Henselt and Radovid decks. Whereas with Nilfgaard, I mean, there's kind of no middle ground between their identities, right? There's the Spy Nilfgaard deck, which kind of builds itself almost in a way that, I mean, Aya was saying with the Wild Hunt tag, these decks, certain types of decks kind of build themselves in a way, and that's good, and it means at the start of the meta, like, those decks are going to be the first ones played and they're going to be very strong. But when other people are actually able to swap out options and decks are able to grow and improve, Spy Nilfgaard and their other options just kind of stay the same.
Aya, what do you think?
I'm just trying to figure out how a cow carcass is a beast.
It's a cow.
A cow is not a beast. It's a domestic animal.
That what we need is a new tag of like former domestic
animal.
Yeah. Right, but yeah. But yeah, I agree with Swim. I think that like spies got a lot of buffs and their numbers are looking pretty good. The fact that the Imperial Brigade is agile is also like really great for them. But like everyone knows their game plan, right? So
yeah,
when you can like sort of like start countering them and like playing around them, they kind of like fall flat.
Mm-hmm.
I think it does come down to like cards not really having crossover. When I think of the decks is something like Cynthia. Like Cynthia, you can get away with not running in a reveal deck, and you could run her in another deck, and you're still gonna generally see value from her, unless she's the very last card that's played in the game. And having that one reveal, as well as her getting boosted, she's a bit of a tempo play, and also you gain the one reveal and you see their most powerful card, which gives you actually a lot of information about their deck, because if you know the cards within that faction, you can tell what's not in their hand depending on what is revealed. So she's like a good example of what the kind of cards that could work across archetypes, but yeah. I don't think that Nilfgaard has enough of them to really have much versatility in how you deck build.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, to be quite honest, it feels like everyone I've talked to has agreed that Nilfgaard has like kind of the lowest amount of flexibility between archetypes, and I'm honestly not even sure what I think the faction that has like the second least flexibility might be. Like Nilfgaard feels like such an outlier in that regard. I'm not even sure how I would even rank the others. It's just a fact that Nilfgaard just doesn't feel flexible, and that's a shame because I really love their identity.
I'm not sure if I'd rank them like in terms of flexibility. It's more sort of like knowing the game plan, because I agree with like Nilfgaard is definitely, you know, this is what I'm doing, but it's not just that the deck builds itself in that regard. It's that your opponent sees it and it's like, I know every card in that deck off of just the fact that you played it purely. Like it's a spies deck. You're gonna play it like this. And the only thing that other faction I think that comes close to having that level, not the inflexibility, but like rigidity of the play style, is probably a lot of the current Skellige stuff that we haven't actually talked about yet. Is you see an X-Men come out, you know what type of deck it is, you know what they're going to be doing, you have ways of playing around that, and I think that Skellige is in the same boat as Nilfgaard in that it's just, you know what you're trying to do, and your opponent knows what you're trying to do, and it's simply a matter of if your opponent can play around it properly or not.
So what do you guys think about Skellige right now? I mean, that's the last one that we haven't really like properly talked about. We kind of mentioned it a little bit. Any takers? Any hope for Skellige?
I think they're in a weird spot. Like, you could do movement and weather, but Scoia'tael does it better. And like, you could try and do greatswords, but everyone's running damage and locks or movement, so that kind of messes that up. Because greatswords have potential because you've got that nice round 3, you know, a few card high tempo play with the resurrects, but you need to have enough turns to allow that to trigger. And with people just locking boats or moving your units, it's very hard to get the synergy happening because you need multiple cards to do it. So it can work. It's either kind of an all or nothing deck. Either they stop you and you just lose, or you're allowed to let it happen and you win really easily. Like, there's no kind of middle ground. Discard is just gone. Like, discard just is not happening. So Skellige, I don't know. I think like maybe a few points here and there might help the greatsword archetype, but is that going to help discard? I don't know.
I feel like Skellige is just like, if we could have gotten the cards that we got in the patch and like all the different archetypes like a couple metas ago, they would have been top. Like, the meta's just shifted away from these long like setup plays, and like, I'm going to go ahead and like play my boat, and I'll go ahead and I'll play my longsword. He'll go ahead and greatsword and buff him up over time and like have a good long round, and like, this is what I'm doing. And it's so low tempo doing all that setup, and everybody else is just like, you don't have 40 points on the board yet? What's wrong with you? It's turn 2. Like, they just, Skellige right now just feels too honest for the meta that we're in, where it's just like, this is what I want to do, please don't mess with it. Like, this is my game plan. And then that is just like, you can't do that right now.
Yeah. And like at first, when I saw like the greatsword, I thought they would be like insane card. I thought they would like grow to like 25 points and stuff. But like in a meta where spies are a thing, where you just like put them in the middle of the long sweep and the greatsword, and like you have to wait 2 turns for the spy to die maybe. And like in a movement Scoia'tael meta where they just move them around, they're just too easy to counter without even the need to take against them. There's just, my deck naturally counters yours. I don't think.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Something I was thinking about a while ago was that greatsword happens to be basically countered by any sort of card or effect that counters anything in the game, right? Yeah. They're countered by small removal, like Alzur's Thunder and Eskel. They're countered by Graveyard Hate. They're countered by movement. They're countered by large removal, like something like Scorch or Igni. I mean, basically the only thing that counters anything that doesn't counter greatswords is Hailstorm. And even then, if it can actually be a little bit awkward for the Hailstorm player if it's like kind of on the wrong turn. There's like an odd or even number of turns. So,
what about agility and axeman? Because I think the vast majority of cards now are agile, which means it's very hard to preempt rows. So, how do we feel that affects Skellige? Aya, what do you think?
I think the Axemen are in an okay spot. I mean, you really have to be careful with that deck because it literally has like no ceiling, so you don't want it to be like too powerful. You want people to be able to play around it. And I mean, even though it's like considered tier 3 deck, I think that has to do with the meta as well, like because Miracles Hailstorm kind of counters it as well. But the Whale Harpooners like really gave some like new soul into that deck, which I kind of like. And I don't know. I think they're okay. I think it would be scary to make Axemen like stronger.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I would say. So, I mean, there have been some decks that are cropping up that actually are basically Axemen decks, except they don't actually use Axemen. And the fact that those decks are even really considered, it definitely doesn't speak well to the state that Axemen are in right now. Like, there is honestly a lot of good things about that deck. You know, there's the Whale Harpooners are actually fantastic cards. I think you can run those super easily anywhere. And a lot of the other things that kind of punish movement right now that are just super common, like Lacerates, maybe off of Herbalist, like Hailstorm, or like even the Gold Weathers that some people are running in those decks. They're all great, but the Axemens themselves almost don't find a place in their own deck, and it does definitely hurt them that so many things are agile, like you're saying, Jagras.
Yeah, I think agility is one of kind of my concerns with the state of the game. I guess the flip side is people are running a lot of gold weather now, so not having agility is going to make that even better, and people will just be really annoyed about that because everyone hates weather when weather's really good. So that's the kind of the flip side is stuff like weather effects, especially triple row weather effects are going to be more powerful because you're more limited, in where you place your units. But on the flip side, when you can place units everywhere, things that have effects to the opposite row are really going to struggle because you play that down and they're like, okay, I'll just not play anything on the row opposite that. I can put these cards, in either of these other two rows. So that's basically a straight counter. And there's not a lot your opponent can do in that, especially in Skellige, except for Harpooners, which is, 3 of your cards. So what do you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, are you in favor or out of favor of agility then? Because I mean, it definitely has its pros and cons.
I think I like agility, but I don't like agility at its current level. I think at the moment there's slightly too much agility. I think some factions, especially Scoia'tael, for example, they have a few ranged units and they have a few siege units, but they're fairly flexible. Similarly with, monsters and consume, that's also fairly flexible. So then other than maybe a few melee units. And again, it kind of makes things difficult. So cards like Wild Hunt Hound, for example, you can't really preempt where your opponent's going to play your card. So then if you're opening with like maybe an Eridan Longship deck or whatever, you're kind of scuppered because you have to just kind of guess. You're like, where am I going to play my weather? So I think I would like to see a little bit more agility, but not every single... a little bit less agility, but not every single card being row locked. Because I feel like the rows at the moment have no real identity.
Yeah, I feel you because I think that Gwent has it's like a really difficult game to balance, right? Because the only thing that you have is just a number on the strength and then the card ability. But at the beginning of closed beta, you could kind of balance some cards by which row they were played on. Or when Woodland Spirit used to be just spawning fog on the opposite row, when a card was just range locked, it was a worse card than being siege locked because fog was so common. So I would like to see more less agile cards because I feel it could be a balancing factor, which row they're on. It could be a bit more flavorful. And I mean, we don't have the weather the way it was now, and that's kind of weird. But I feel we should have more row lock cards. It will add a bit more depth to the game.
I think balancing Gwent is hard because it's not just numbers on the card, but the way that the game has evolved over time. It's just constantly what was balanced before, you can change something completely unrelated and be like, whoa, Miracles Hailstorm just to mind, where it's just cool, it's in a good spot, and then the meta shifts a little bit, and it's wait a second, something's got to give somewhere. And I think it's, as far as agile is concerned, I actually do like that direction of the game. I would like to see more of it. One thing I keep seeing suggested, and honestly at this point I've just seen it suggested so many times that I'm just why not try it out and see what happens, is the idea of an ideal row for a card where if it's on a melee row, it's at full power, and if it's on any of the other rows, it loses 1 or 2 strength or something. I don't know if that's a good way of going about it, but honestly, I've seen it's just enough that I'm just what would happen if we actually all just got a chance to sit down and play like that.
It could even be attached to a keyword. I mean, you could have certain cards that gain 1 strength, gain 2 strength, or even like gain an additional part of its ability or something like that. I mean, there's a lot of options there. I'm actually in that same boat. I think agility is pretty great. I mean, there's definitely downsides to it, and a lot of things. I think the important thing to understand is that like moving for agility would be a part of a larger change, I guess I would say. Like Jaggers, you were saying that it's awkward that you have to hound an empty row or something like that. That's absolutely true, but like certain cards like Drowner just kind of like basically mitigate that, because you can just frost an empty row and you don't really mind because you Drowner it. There definitely do need to be a lot of accompanying changes to the idea of agility, and a lot of people are saying, you know, oh, there's too much agility in the game now, a lot of things don't really make sense. I think a lot of things could be smoothened out, but I'm in favor of like what agility really, I think, represents as a direction. There's a lot of nuance to it. I'd like to see something tried out like what Dale's saying, honestly.
I think we've discussed the meta and the individual cards to death. So maybe we can talk about some other interesting news. So we're getting a chance to see all of this, all of these changes, and see how other people, other competitive players are taking it. And one of those, I think, events that's coming up right now is Gwent Slam. And I think we touched on it a little bit earlier, but we never really delved too much into it. So I know we talked about it last week a bit, and since then there were the changes to the way that the crown points were going to be handed out. What are you guys' thoughts, opinions on that going on?
Controversy. This is great. This was like the closest thing Gwent had to drama that I think it's ever had. I love me a little bit of drama. I'm one of those people who sits back and like eats their popcorn and watches everything unfold. And like people were angry. People were so angry about this. And I think kudos to CDPR. Like they took the feedback on board, and I think they made some changes that are definitely going to improve the esports scene. I feel like Gwent as an esport is really in its infancy, and like people are going to make mistakes, and that's okay. I feel like Life Coach kind of got thrown under the bus a little bit because Gwent Slam is his tournament, and then suddenly it was like Life Coach is the devil and he's ruining Gwent and he's inviting all of his best friends and no one else is allowed in, and it's not fair. And I kind of felt really bad for him, but at the same time, like it was a lot of good popcorn, so I don't feel too bad.
We're a real esport now. We have drama.
Yeah, tick that off the checkbox.
Yeah, I kind of felt that, like, I understood like what the controversy was about, and I feel like a kind of easier fix would be to like have like 16 spots in the tournament maybe instead of 8. I mean, I know that makes like the tournament longer and maybe a bit more difficult to manage, but you're gonna have to sacrifice something. And I feel like only taking 2 people from the pro ladder is a bit harsh, because it means that like 3,000 other.
Yep. We lose audio there.
I think we.
Yeah, your audio's gone.
I'm not sure whose end that might have been on.
Okay, it's not just.
Aya,
Aya's still there.
Aya, can you hear us?
Can you hear us, Aya? Oh, there.
Oh, okay.
There we
you just cut out completely there for a second. Sorry.
It looks like it's still happening a tiny bit. Uh-oh.
Was I speaking to controversial things and you just like censored me?
I think you're back, so we're good now. So just don't say anything too controversial and we'll be okay.
All right, so I don't know where I left off, but I was saying that maybe it would be better to open a tournament to like top 16, so you can have 5 invitees and then like 11 people from the ladder, because it feels like a bit too harsh to have 3,000 people on the pro ladder, but only like 2 of them really have a chance. And like if these things like kind of they kept going, then why even bother playing the pro ladder unless you feel like you could be in like number 1 or number 2, right? Yeah. And I mean, I like the approach they took with like maximum invitees and like not getting crown points and stuff. But I feel like opening the tournament to more people, even though it will make the tournament like maybe longer and stuff, I feel it might be like worth the sacrifice to like make the tournament feel more open, more accessible, like people.
I really hope that that's something that they can move forward to, like a goal to work towards is top 16. Because even though you said it'd make the tournament longer, I think I like longer tournaments. I like watching somebody try and go through it all. But I definitely understand why they're sticking with 8 for now. Because as you mentioned, Gwent as an esports in its infancy, and if you try and pay for travel and lodgings, and you're like, okay, we can do 8 people, and it's like, well, we need to do 16. So you literally just doubled all those costs there, and I'm just not sure. I can see why the cut was made where it was, and I'm hoping that something that can be lifted as time goes on. Maybe get to more top 16 tournaments, but for now, I'm okay with it. But with all the changes that CDPR made, especially with the crown points, it's I think a step greatly in the right direction, not allowing the direct invites to be able to get the crown points like that. It's just, I don't know, I feel like I white knight CDPR too hard sometimes, and then they do stuff like this. I'm just like, yeah, this is why I support them. Don't let me down, Vers. I know you're listening. Don't do it.
Yeah, I think you can understand the reasoning behind some of the decisions that they've made in terms of number of people. And I mean, they're definitely like, they're not being ungenerous. Like if you look at the prize pooling and the kind of number of tournaments that they themselves are running throughout the next year, like they're clearly invested in Gwent as an esport. And I think they also fronted the prize pool for Gwent Slam, I believe. So again, they're quite happy to put money into the scene, but at the same time, you kind of have to be sensible with that. And this is kind of their trial run. So at this point, I think it is safer to start small and then grow bigger. I think some of the concerns that players had was very, they were valid, especially concerns about people who live in, say, Australia or, in regions where traveling to Europe is much more expensive, that those players are kind of getting left out, even if they have the skill level. I can see why these were things that people had issue with. I guess the problem is, like, how do you fairly fix that?
There's kind of not really like a cure-all, right? Like, I mean, it's always gonna there's always gonna be, I guess, awkwardnesses in terms of like people that demand 100% absolute fairness in every single way.
I mean, this was the same with the Pro Ladder, right? People were complaining that, certain people were getting access to this special content and they weren't, and that wasn't fair because everyone should have access to everything. And now that we have it, nobody cares. Like, nobody's like, oh man, exactly. The Pro Ladder, that was a terrible decision. Hindsight 2020, I feel like this is one of these things where we're going to have to kind of wait and see how it goes. And then, if there's bumps along the way, I think that CDPR are more than capable of ironing those out and listening. And with Gwent Slam, I think it'll be good fun. I think that, there's still the qualifiers as well. You've got the first person from the Pro Ladder, and then there's also like a tournament you can enter, I believe. Yeah,
the two slots for the qualifiers, I think.
So there are options for people who want to try and get in there. It's not just, grind your life out on the Pro Ladder. People who aren't in the Pro Ladder can try and enter through these tournaments, for example. There are definitely options for players that want to get in. The issue, I guess, most people have is, like Aya said, that it's just 8 people. But like Dale said, I can kind of understand why that's the case.
Well, speaking of not the controversy, but more of the actual players involved and cards involved, I mean, what are we expecting this tournament meta to look like for Gwent Slam? Like, what do we think that's going to be like top dog in the tournament setting? What's just not going to do as well?
Well, the format is the Masters format, which is 4 decks, 1 ban. I expect people to ban typically Northern Realms or maybe Monsters. I'm not sure. I mean, I guess one of the biggest questions is, do we expect it? What's the last deck we expect people to drop more often, right? I think most people are going to be deciding between Scoia'tael and Skellige. Some people might decide to drop Nilfgaard. And that's honestly one of the biggest things that I'm very interested in seeing, because I mean, people kind of know, the top decks that are going to be brought and the top decks that are going to be banned. But what's really going to show here is who can figure out the best way to make, the lesser powerful decks, Skellige, Scoia'tael, maybe Nilfgaard, who's going to make them like the most viable? That's probably going to be the biggest thing.
I would not be surprised to see Nilfgaard take the stage at some point, just because with so many of like just the option of banning out something, and I don't know, like I feel like that could be like the deck that no one really expects to be brought in, especially when someone's just like, yeah, Nilfgaard might just be cut entirely. Like, and somebody shows up with Nilfgaard, and you're just like, okay, what? Like, you know, it's going to be very archetypical, what archetype, and then you show up with Mill, and that can get some pretty solid matchups, I think.
Like what? What's a good matchup for Mill right now?
Northern Realms, probably.
Just deck strengthening focused, right?
Yeah. It can pick off Northern Realms pretty well. I was actually playing earlier today, and I mean, typically the Northern Realms answer to Mill is Naneki, right? You've got Naneki, you reuse Naneki, you've got, I mean, potentially, these decks can potentially use Naneki like 4 or 5 times at a maximum. And I actually, he was running a Mill deck, and he used Artifact Compression on my Naneki, and I ended up losing because I couldn't do anything against the Mill at that point. And there's a lot of cheeky things you can do in terms of like the Mill fake, because Mill is such a scare, right? So like we've seen strategies, we've seen people run Emir Spies to kind of bait the opponent into thinking that you're running Mill, and we've also seen Morv ran Mill to bait the opponent into thinking that you're not running Mill. It's it's actually, I mean, there's some sneaky stuff you can do around that. So we might just be seeing some people, 1 or 2 people, try something like that.
I hate Mill. It takes so long, and then in tournaments everyone ropes. And then it's like, you know, like Mill deck shows up, I watch a tournament, I'm like, okay, it's time to go have some dinner, and then come back, and it's still not over. They're on like round 2, and you're like, oh god. You know, I understand why Mill is talked about as a surprise archetype, because it kind of, you either get a favorable matchup and you can kind of throw away all your opponent's cards, or they have a counter and you just play a very long game that inevitably ends in a loss. I don't know if bringing it to a tournament is necessarily the smartest thing, because you have to win with every deck. So if your opponent just has cards that counters Mill, then you just lose, then you're out, and that's it. So it's like, I guess you have this back and forth of, is my opponent going to bring Mill? If I think my opponent's going to bring Mill, so long as I have a counter for Mill in every single one of my decks, then I'm fine. Like, there's objectively, because of the Masters format, you only need to be able to beat one of their decks 3 times, if that makes sense. Yeah. So that's one of the things you kind of have to think about in terms of what you bring. I agree that Northern Realms is probably the one that's going to be banned, but I don't necessarily think that Scoia'tael is as bad as Skellige. I feel like people just won't bring Skellige, because Skellige is incredibly predictable and easy to counter. I mean, maybe they'll have some surprise. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm okay with being wrong. That's fine. Like, I will be happy to be wrong on that one, because I love me some Skellige. So
if there's any time that I'm happy to be wrong, it's like, this tournament's going to have these decks and it's going to go exactly like that. Like, unexpected tournaments are the best experience, like viewer experience, I think, where you just
Yeah, I mean, at least that's a good thing of having invitees that don't really get crown points. They have room to experiment, right, and troll the tournament with crazy decks, right? So
yeah, no, I'm honestly quite relieved that they took away the crown points, because I can just bring whatever I want now.
Yeah, I think that like. Yeah, Northern Elves seems like the thing to ban, but I feel like Northern Elves, you can kind of, I mean, everyone that brings Northern Elves is going to be an armor deck, so you can kind of like try to have a good matchup against it, and then you use the opportunity to maybe ban something else. I don't feel like Mill is going to be a thing, because it's kind of a double-edged sword, as we saw like in previous tournaments. You either do well with it, or you just lose because you didn't get like the matchup you want. So I'm seeing everyone just bringing spies, armor, like a good type of monsters, and probably a movement Scoia'tael, because there are some pretty good matchups in the tournament format for the movement Scoia'tael.
I could see a little bit of Scoia'tael as well, especially with some bans. I mean, Scoia'tael is a deck that there's a lot of ways to optimize it pretty well. I think it's kind of underrated right now. Like, people, like Stamelford's got nerfed and everyone just dropped it.
I think Swim mentioning Mill is like advanced tactics. He's just like, yeah, guys, people are going to bring Mill, and you should definitely be prepared for that. And then to try and this is just some like long con with the other competitors that he wants to kind of, you know, say these things because people are listening. And I agree. I think Scoia'tael will be the most interesting one to keep an eye on in terms of what people bring, because that's the one where you can kind of have a bit of fun. You know, you could do a boost strategy, you could do like a hand boost strategy, or like a Marauder's just boosting strategy. You could do movement. I think that's the most flexible one, and that's where we'll see the most innovation.
Yeah, I completely agree. I'd love to see like what people are bringing for the Scoia'tael slots, and I hope it's not too much just gold weathers and movement.
I'm very much looking forward to that. But keeping with the competitive scene, but going to our stuff. So the Gwentlemen's Invitational Week 6 has now brought the playoffs to their conclusion. So the top 16 are being played. So we're moving on to quarterfinals. Like, what? I think, like, are we surprised to see in the top 16? Like, because there's been a lot of teams that have just kind of come out, like, I'll say right off, like, for me, Team Aardvark, just the Facebook team, coming out of, I think, Facebook. Not really, like, where you're expecting to be like, all right, cool, where are all the top tier competitive levels chilling? They're just hanging out on Facebook. Like, it's not something where, like, I personally would be expecting, and it's really cool for me because it's like, yes, like, all these teams coming from all these different spots and trying to go for that prize pool at the end. Like, I don't know. My money's on Aardvark, but what about you guys?
Man, after all this time, just seeing, I mean, every week it's been Swiss, and just seeing it boil down to these 8 teams after basically everything. Aardvark, man. What an underdog story, honestly. I mean, that's...
I was just going to say, I think it's pretty great. I mean, you know, people like to make jokes about Reddit or Twitch, and it's meanwhile, all of the actual decent players have been like hanging out on Facebook, eating caviar and just laughing at us. Like,
yeah, that's where the Gwent competitive scene is at.
I think the other thing to be aware of here is we have a real geographical mix. I mean, we have SGC, which are the Slovenian team. They're not the Slovakian team, in case anyone was unsure about that. Sixth faction, I believe, are Korean. And then we also have, obviously, Finland on there. And different teams have players from all over. XD Esports obviously has Petrify, so we've got an Aussie on there as well. And it's kind of cool to see a tournament that's just not straight dominated by EU. And part of me wants to see, you know, I want to see these other regions really kind of show it to us, because I think EU, we get a bit like... We get a bit kind of complacent, and we're like, yeah, well, we're the best, you know, like other regions, you know, do your own thing, we're fine. And then, so it would be cool to see some of these teams succeed, and it's also really cool to see this kind of regional thing, because in CSGO, for example, you know, all of the teams come from different places. You have very kind of national followings for each team. Like, if you're watching a game in Poland and a Polish team is playing, the crowd is completely behind that team. And so I think it's interesting to see it here, that we have these different regions and that people might cheer for a team just based on where the players are from.
Yep.
Yeah, and it's also like kind of easier to play this tournament if you are in a regional team, because I know that like my team, for example, had problems with figuring out like a good time slot, because we had people from East Coast, West Coast, and Japan. So I feel like it's actually easier if like you make a team and everyone is in the same country, or at least the same continent, and it's going to be like easier for you to actually compete. And then another consideration that I've had about this tournament is whether it's like because it's like a team format, right? And we all play together. Like we talk and we just execute the moves, whether people that like know each other a lot and maybe they know they work well together are better than people that just like randomly made a team and went into the tournament.
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I personally just looking through this list, I'm rooting for Team XD Esports International and Team Pixie as well. I'm familiar with every player from both of those teams, and what?
You're betting against Gwentlemen there.
Yeah, I know.
Pixie, you're like, yeah, like, you know, we lost, so Screw you guys, Team Pixie.
I happen to be very good friends with 2 people from Team Pixie. Is that so wrong?
Well, we are actually, so one of the other cool things with this tournament, besides this being our very first Gwentlemen's Invitational, is that any donations that we receive as a team right now are going, all of it. We're not keeping any of it. It goes right to the prize pool. And we started off with, I think, $200 from us. And the community's rallied behind us and gotten us over $1,000. And I just want to thank you, everybody who helped donate to that prize pool, because it's just really cool getting the community support. And speaking of the community support, I do want to also thank all the teams that have participated, all of the mediators who also helped step in and try and keep things running smoothly. And if you were a member of a team and you didn't get an invite for this Gwentlemen's Invitational, this is not going to be the only one. We want to keep doing more of these. So please contact us. And we'll see if we can send out more invites, because getting newer faces, fresh faces for the next one's Invitational is going to be really cool as well. But for the actual cast, so this coming up Tuesday, September 19th, and also Thursday, which is next Thursday, we're going to be doing the playoff matches for TGI, and can confirm that we will have at least the Swim and McBeard combo casting the quarterfinals on Tuesday. So that should be really cool to watch, but because we're doing the casting on Thursday as well for the quarterfinals, we will not be doing our talk show then, but I believe it's going to be at the same spot. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, Swim. Same time slot. Or is it earlier?
You know what? That's actually one thing I'm not 100% sure on.
I would imagine it'll be earlier, because normally TGI starts at 8 CST, and this starts at 10.
I would normally know that, but I actually am not going to be able to participate in that one, since I'm going to be on a plane for 17 hours.
No excuses, Swim. But no, so definitely check those out for the casting. And if you, we cast ours over on Team Gwentlemen and in English, because that's the main language that most of us speak. But we also have other localized casts going on: Italian cast with Chado, Russian cast with Pro Neo and Melee Man, French cast with Remark, Polish cast with Ozone, Brazilian cast with Korvak. And if your name was not on that list that I just mentioned, please reach out to us and we'll try and help set you up if you want to cast in a different language, in your language. As was pointed out, the really cool thing with Gwent period and with Gwentlemen's Invitational is that we have teams from all over the world speaking all sorts of different languages, and that's just really awesome, in my opinion.
You gonna do a Greek cast, Aya?
Yeah, you want to do it?
Yeah, and maybe like 5 people would watch. But sure, I might try.
Greek Gwent, you gotta make it great. It's gonna be the next big thing. Next tournament, it's just gonna be overrun by Greek players. I have faith.
No, we have very strong players, and we do have a very dedicated community, even if it's small. But watch out for us.
I'm worried. Like the Greeks, I don't think they'll take any prisoners. Like you should be careful.
If there's one thing we've learned from how some of the things in the tournament have gone, you really can't underestimate anybody.
Yep. All right, and finishing up the tournament scene wrap up is, so one of the big things with Gwentlemen's Invitational, Gwent Slam, you kind of need to get invited to these tournaments or earn your way in. But if you are still interested in tournaments, and I highly encourage you guys to, and you're trying to get into that tournament club, Gwentlemen's Open, which is the other tournament that we run for September, the signups are open. It is open to everybody, even if you had no prior experience with tournaments whatsoever. You just got into playing Gwent today, you can still participate. So the tourney, all the qualifiers are going to be on September 30th, and then the finals are going to be on October 1st, and we'll get that cast for you probably October 2nd, because we normally try and keep that on a Saturday, Sunday, Monday schedule, so we can get that for you guys. But yeah, if you are interested in signing up for that, head over to gwentlemen.com/TGO, and we have the link for you right there. It's just easier to get to. Probably the easiest sign up that we've had for one of these tournaments, I think, Swim.
Yeah.
Yay, Gwentlemen Open, even though it's on October.
It's September.
Yeah, the timing of it was a little bit awkward. I mean, it works out. It just kind of it loses the whole September action. It's just it's okay. It's still a September tournament.
It starts in September, so it's totally fine, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
It's fine.
Well, I think we have time for a couple viewer questions, but while we're waiting for those viewer questions to come in, I always like asking it. Aya, what is your favorite premium card right now?
Oh, my favorite premium. Well, I think that Sunny is my all-time favorite. I feel like there's so much like emotion in that card, you know? And I remember opening her in closed beta, so now I recently crafted her in open beta too. So that's one of my favorites. And I guess like the runner-up would be Johnny. Because that's also a card with emotion, if you think about it.
Oh man, like just the animated like going to the bathroom. It's so good. Shani, speaking of her, I didn't realize for the longest time. I thought she was giving the guy like CPR. She's not. She's just like crying on his corpse.
Yeah,
it's like
it's
way more. I thought she was like, yeah, I'm gonna save him. Like I'm doing it. But instead, it's just like it's the complete opposite. Like he's dead.
Like I made the same exact
that way because you're trying to like if you were the one trying to save me, you're just like I can't do anything. At least for me, that's how I'd be. Just like no, you're dead.
Yeah.
No, what about you guys?
You know what? I was actually looking through. I saw. I really like Stennis's premium from. I had a glance at it today. It's actually it's one of the better premiums. He's doing a thing and then there's lightning blood. I don't know. It's it's kind of subtle. It's a little dramatic.
I feel like when I make premiums of cards that I've crafted to do stupid things. So like I think I have like treason premium. I'm just like, you know what? If we're gonna craft this, we're gonna waste scrap on this like card that I'm never gonna play. We gotta commit to the scrap wasting. So a lot of my premiums are like cards that just don't see play, and they're just kind of chilling out premium. I got premium doo-doo, for example. Like there's some pretty bad cards, but actually their premiums are pretty decent. It's just that no one ever sees them. Like treason, you got the gross teeth and the money flinging. It's a really nicely done premium that no one ever sees.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's also a spell though. It's not even the fact that it's not played. You only see it for when it's in your hand and for a second.
That's true.
And I'm not seeing any. If you have any viewer questions for us, I'm not seeing any that have come through yet. Just throw it at Gwentlemen in the chat, and we'll go ahead and talk about it. So just a reminder on that. For mine, I don't know. I always feel like I jump around on like what my favorite premium is because like I'll be like, yes, like my premium for the next 20 minutes until I see something else really cool. Like right now I've really been digging Renew. It's just I don't know. There's something about like the movement on that card because it's a card art that doesn't really need the movement, but then when you add it to it, it adds that extra bit that I really like.
Yeah, honestly, the spell premiums are kind of the best ones. I mean, some people say spell premiums aren't the ones you should go for because you only see them for a second, but it's because you only see them for a little bit that they're kind of like they're rare, special.
All right, well, our first viewer question is, we haven't addressed Gold Weather. What's our opinion on it?
Gold Weather. Ooh.
I don't like the comeback of Gold Weather in conjunction with the Miracles Hailstorm. So when I'm playing all three, like Ragnarok, Drought, and Marigolds, I feel like it's very disgusting because your opponent is trying to force you to like row stack to dodge the Ragnarok, and then you just get Marigold and cry. And I mean, it's kind of our fault for like not running mages anymore. But I feel like it's just like this spot in the meta that brought their comeback, and they will eventually like fade away. Yeah,
I don't know. Gold Weathers are always a tricky one. I think that they're actually not too bad right now. I feel like a couple of incidental things could be touched up, like you're saying, Hailstorm. Maybe seeing a minor nerf would help. And potentially even something like the single row weather clears coming up in value in any way. Because, I mean, the thing about gold weathers is the single row weather clears just feel completely useless against them. Like, you're really not doing anything at all. And it just feels like there should be other ways to counter them other than running silver mages. I mean, First Light is an option, but most decks can't actually really fit First Light in at all. And not even every deck can really properly fit in their silver mage. I feel like they're fine, but I'd like to see some incidental things like Hailstorm and like potentially weather clears. Maybe see some minor tweaks.
Yeah, gold weather is like kind of weird because the issue with gold weather is maybe not necessarily just gold weather. It's gold weather which you then counter by stacking rows, and then by stacking rows you then get marigolds. So it's like you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't, unless you can clear it. And most people aren't running multiple clears, but people are running multiple gold weathers, which is, I guess, where we start to see an issue. And I think with gold weather, there's always going to be this kind of ebb and flow. Like as weather kind of becomes more prominent, people are going to attack against it, which causes weather to become less prominent, which causes, people to take out their weather clear. And so it's always going to be this kind of balancing act. But for me, I don't feel like they're too problematic. I mean, saying that, I did just do a video on my YouTube channel, Shameless Self-Promotion, where I was like, which legendary should you craft? Well, you should craft gold weather because it's just good. And, you're always going to, you're basically always going to see value. And you can throw it in any deck. But I feel like for me, like gold weather's not necessarily the problem. It's maybe that people, like Swim said, they don't have the options for clear, and also in conjunction with marigolds, which is being looked at, and moving units about. So I don't know. I feel like it's okay.
I mean, weather is such a hard mechanic to balance for because, I mean, it's either going to be very good if the opponent can't pass, and like clears aside, forget about clears. Like clears are one thing, but then you also have to balance around the pass. Like it's always going to be kind of too good if the opponent can't pass, and kind of not good enough if they can, right? Because everybody has access to this inherent clear, which is just passing and giving up the round and forcing something out, maybe. But it's just, I mean, it's really tricky to balance for in that way because it's kind of, it's always going to either swing a game on its own or not necessarily do enough. It feels very strange.
I feel like they're in a pretty... Oh, good.
I was just going to say, I guess part of it that people maybe are frustrated with is Roach, because what you can do on turn one, like you can just play weather. If you have Roach, you then get points on the board. So previously you couldn't just play weather because if you played weather, it doesn't pull Roach. So your opponent could just pass and you'd have to go 2 deck cards down to get the card. So you'd have to hold your weather a little at least. Whereas now what you can do is just play your weather first card. Roach comes out. If they pass, you win the round because, Roach is on the board. So you got 4 points and they got none. And maybe that's an interaction that potentially is problematic and is one of the things that if you wanted to do like a very soft nerf, that's the kind of nerf you could do where Roach is only pulled by units and not by specials, for example.
Yeah, it kind of, I guess that would make gold weather have more, it feels like it have more of a cost because then if you, maybe you like, you need to actually feel like you stay ahead, especially if you lose the coin flip with it.
I mean, there was, sorry.
No.
There was discussion like before that you could kind of like maybe have a timer on weather so that like it kind of runs out after 5 turns or something, which is something I'm not like totally against because the problem with weather is that it's like too good in a long round but like too bad in a short round. But I mean, if people are not running weather clears, I feel like it can act like as a poison on the road. Like
like a soft cap for the timer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think overall gold weathers are okay. I think weather's okay, and like it's funny like listening to this one where he's just like people like First Light is always an option, silver mages are always an option. It's just like, oh, you can't fit these in a deck, and I'm like, if gold weathers are really to the point that we are like, oh man, like it's everywhere, like you have to attack against it, you're gonna find a spot in the deck to fit these weather clears in. And the fact that we're not in that spot suggests to me that they're doing okay. They're riding maybe a little bit higher than they should have just because of Hailstorm. Maybe that ended like just because the counter to it is to stack and then Hailstorm punishes you for that and other things will punish you that way. But the fact that we're not like immediately jumping in and throwing in like 3 First Lights and our silver mage suggest.
Well,
I
think a large part of the problem with those cards though is they don't even really properly counter weather in the way that they like. You should be able to swing for value, I would say. I mean, even in many situations, like I played 2 games earlier today out of the ones where I played against the gold weather deck. In one game I had a mage that I didn't actually use a clear with, right? Like he had me droughted and I literally just used Death Mold for zap because there's no point in clearing it. He had the other one that he was just going to use anyway. And in other cases, you can't. I mean, First Light is such a tricky card. There's so many games that you'll lose, even if you either have the clear as an option, whether you use it or you don't. Like, you can still just end up in a really bad spot. Like, it just feels as if you're not actually, like, the purpose of a clear doesn't really do enough. And we saw this a lot in the last patch as well, where Dagon was the deck. It was running rampant, and even though clears existed, and even though it was a really large percentage of matchups at a higher level, clears just kind of don't really do enough on your own. I mean, you're running like a vanilla 7 that clears the road. That's kind of cute. Or you're running a mage, which you can clear like 1 or 2 rows of weather, but then they're just going to play more. It just feels like it doesn't swing enough.
I think on the flip side, part of the counter to at least like movement decks, for example, is if they play their weather, the idea is they want you to pass and then they get an easy round and they can do a long round with more weather. So one of the ways you can counter it is just by ignoring it and playing into it and then draining their cards round 1, because they're probably, their plan there is you're starting to stack rows and maybe they'll move your unit, so maybe they're trying to Marigolds you. But if you can keep enough tempo that they keep playing cards round 1, then round 2 and 3 are much, much easier because they don't really have anything big. It's all kind of very combo based. So in some ways, like just letting the weather tick and then just doing like kind of dealing with it in that way is definitely something that players can employ, and it's definitely a strategy that I think, at least in ranked and on the pro ladder, you're starting to see people utilize in order to counter movement Scoia'tael weather as a archetype.
All right, well, I think that is all the time that we have for the show this week. Aya, thank you very much for agreeing to be our guest again. Definitely appreciated. Any closing shout outs or statements?
I hadn't thought about shout-outs, but...
Yeah, it's hard, isn't it?
Yeah, they do this every time. Just put you on the spot.
Oh, crap. Well, no, just thank you guys for inviting me. It was a lot of fun. And I guess I'd just like to thank everyone for watching. Oh, my God, generic things. And oh, and yeah, maybe I should shout out my team for the TGI. Mitranon and Varanis. We had a lot of fun, and please do another one of these again. It was great fun.
Oh, there'll be more.
Oh yeah. Sound a little creepy, Swim.
Huh?
Oh, there will.
There will, yes. Swim, any closing shout-out statements?
Oh, me? No, I've...
See, that's the other way to answer that question, Aya.
Yeah. I mean,
that was an option.
Jagger, any shout-out statements?
Well, I always shout out chat. Without you guys posting your ha-has for the last hour and a half, we would not know just how terrible this talk show has been. So shout outs to you, chat. We love to hate you. And shout outs to Facebook Gwent. That's where the real MVPs are, you guys. That's where we need to go. No, I've had a great time. Thanks for obviously adding me to the hosting team. It's been real.
Thank you very much for being here with us. And as always, my shout outs go to the Discord community, the Reddit community, the Ask Gwent community. I mean, just the fact that there is as much community support as there is. You just don't really see that in other games. At least I haven't in other games that I've played, so it's sincerely appreciated. Gwent.reddit.com. From there, you can check out the official Gwent Discord. There's also the Ask Gwent Discord that you can find a link to that, ask a question, get an answer. It's extremely valuable if you're a new player trying to get into the game and you're just trying to figure out how things are working. It's extremely valuable if you're like me and I'm trying to remember what cards do after they've gotten changed half a dozen times. It's a good community. Also, shout outs to the weekly tournaments that go on. There is, I can never remember the name of the new one that started. It's every Monday.
Gwent Mania from Life Coach, you mean?
Yes, that one. Shout out to that tournament. There's actually also the Bowstring Tension Cup every Monday, as well as the TCG Weekly Esports tournament every Tuesday. And again, if you're just looking to get in the tournament scene, the weekly tournaments are a really good place to start because, also Gwentlemen's open, but it's just a good place to get into it, to try and get your feet wet, get used to the tournament, how to play in them, and it's fun. Just try it if you haven't, and if you do and you don't like it, then you just watch like I do. That's all the time that we have for the talk show this week. We'll be back on this channel on Tuesday for the first half of the quarterfinals cast. It's going to be Swim and McBeard, and we'll be back on this channel again following Thursday, not for the talk show, but for the second half of the quarterfinals cast. And then we'll be back doing a normal talk show, not next week, but the week after. Thank you very much, everybody who tuned in today and everybody who chatted with us. It's been a lot of fun, and we'll see you on this channel on Tuesday. Have a good one, guys.
Bye.
Bye.